There are just that many series and titles that I feel are really good or plain enjoyable, but didn't quite make it to the mainstream. So let me introduce to you some awesome anime that you may have overlooked or forgotten about through the years. Whether this list of anime will open new horizons or get you feeling all nostalgic, we'll all have to wait and see. Anyone heard about Altair, A Record of Battles?
いつかわかるさ。私は戦争が好きなわけじゃない。帝国の延命を願う一人の愛国者なだけだ。
In a season that's relatively tame, I mean, we've got Made in Abyss, Gamers, Classroom of the Elite, and Kakegurui, but not much that became too mainstream, one show that still managed to get buried underneath all of them is Altair, A Record of Battles. However, it's quite easy to see why. It seems that military-themed anime just isn't something that becomes too mainstream unless there's an extremely notable or charismatic element to it, like Saga of Tanya. Altair, on the other hand, actually sets its focus on something that we don't see too often in military anime, the behind-the-scenes. The tactics, the economics, the politics behind it all. It's something that people don't seem too receptive to, but nonetheless it's interesting. Definitely not something you'd see every day in the realm of historical fiction. It's more a tactical approach to the whole idea of warfare, and if you're someone who's up for a different take to the military and war genres, following the adventures of Two Grill Marmot could be something that you could try. Ushio and Tora is up next. We've been used to seeing a lot of old classics being reimagined and modernised these days, but it seems as if they weren't as common back then. Or maybe it's just a result of the remade titles being not as popular those days, with the exception of Hunter x Hunter. One such example is Ushio and Tora, the 2015 remake of an early 90s anime. It's not the first time we've seen the story of a boy protagonist being forced to work with a supernatural being that may or may not be hostile. We've seen this type of dynamic in stuff like Parasite, for example. But all in all, Ushio and Tora does relish in the good old traditional Japanese culture aesthetic. It does feel like a spiritual ancestor or inspiration to shows like Inuyasha or Natsume's Book of Friends. It's a pretty straightforward shonen that starts off with a monster of the week fare before the real plot kicks in. However, it does have its moments, and I think that it's a show that shonen fans might enjoy. Following that is Nura, Rise of the Yokai Clan. Carrying some similar vibes to Ushio and Tora is Nura, Rise of the Yokai Clan. Nura, however, does share some similarities with Hitman Reborn, where the focus is on the protagonist's clan and their stories that are entwined with them. The show may seem a little plain at first, but it's overall a very enjoying watch once you get to know much of the characters, start to care for them thanks to their charming personalities, and root for them as they fight various threats to both the human world and the existence of the Nura clan. And trust me, there's a lot of them in the 2 seasons of the show's run. The show is a great watch, but one major thing I can say that holds it back is how it ends on a major cliffhanger with no anime continuation in sight. It means that you just have to jump off and go read the manga at some point, but you know what, the journey's worth it in my opinion. Karakuri Circus follows, and it's another show you might enjoy. Somehow, we find ourselves back to Kazuhiro Fujita. If you did your googling in the middle of the video, you'll know that this guy is the creator of Ushio and Tora, which we just featured a few moments ago. Just like the other title, Karakuri Circus brings a lot of the old school violence and the vibrant expressions that the creator's known for. Instead of going down the supernatural route, Karakuri Circus takes a more modern approach, instead integrating its battles with dolls and puppets, giving a distinct style that blends battle shonen with a mild science vibe. It's probably something like Unbreakable Machine Doll, yet another show that got buried in the hype of seasonal counterparts, and in this case, predominantly Kill la Kill. The adaptation got mixed to mostly negative reactions from the fans, which could be a huge reason as to why it got buried in the blockbuster season featuring Bunny Girl Senpai, Goblin Slayer, Slime, Alicization, and Zombieland Saga. While it may not hold a candle to the mentioned shows in terms of popularity, Karakuri Circus ended up being one of the enjoyable side watches that I did have at that time. It's a side watch for a reason though, but I did have fun with it in spite of them cutting a lot of stuff from the manga. What I feel is a very strong anime, even taking the changed or cut content into account, is the Ambition of Oda Nobuna. Understandably, the idea of gender-bent historical figures in an anime series raises some eyebrows. Yeah, there's fate, but a lot of these types of shows typically ended up leaving no cultural footprint at all, being relegated to fan service fests, which pivots into the reputation these gender-bent shows got generalized into. The Ambition of Oda Nobuna is a show that does little to disprove that stereotype. It actively relishes in the sexy, has a pervy main character in an isekai before the genre boomed and those tropes became scrutinized, and has a pretty pragmatic approach in adapting source material. But deep within all of that is a diamond in the rough. You see, while Nobuna does play around with the fan service, it also contains a pretty engaging story about both warfare, history, and the budding relationship between our protagonist and the gender-bent warlords of the Sengoku era. The last arc, the one with the most changes from the source material, in fact feels better to see in what the anime did due to the payoff and the climactic feel it gives in terms of the hero's relationship with Nobuna and the gang. Still, it's got that curse of having an insane cliffhanger ending, plus it aired in the same season as the first SAO, so it's a case of wrong place, wrong time. Not that it would explode in popularity in a weaker season given its genre and the amount of relatively tamer fan service compared to actual ecchi shows. And if you want more videos on shows that flew under the radar like this one, then don't forget to hit the like button and share the video. It's my way of seeing which content you like and which areas to focus on, so let your voice be heard through the views and likes. The year's 2021. Isekai titles are a dime a dozen and have practically taken over the anime world. The genre's also garnered a not-so-stellar reputation, and the big titles often find themselves in some sort of controversy, with Mushoku Tensei being one of the starkest examples of that. However though, in the same season that featured the second part of Mushoku Tensei is this isekai title that at least tries to spice things up a little bit. World's Finest Assassin looks to provide an isekai experience with some creative changes. Gone was the loser otaku protagonist and the quest to save the world, and in comes the grizzled assassin tasked to defeat the previous hero in this fantasy world. In spite of several titles' attempts to spice up the isekai formula with some twists with the premise, they often fall into the same trappings of the genre eventually. For World's Finest Assassin, I think it succeeds in skirting those trappings, well, to some extent. Sure, you've got the controversial themes, the betrayed, cynical protag trope, an overpowered protagonist, the harem atmosphere, but they're all done in a less upfront and more muted way than a lot of isekai. It becomes even more amazing when you recall that the guy behind this is the one who made the mimetic redo of Healer. Compared to the latter, this thing's a masterpiece, and the same could be said when putting it alongside half the random isekai titles out there. Now, if you wonder what other creators have been up to, I present to you Idaten Deities. It feels fitting to follow up redo of Healer Guy's creation with this other underrated action show, this time from the guys who brought us Goboyashi-san and Interspecies Reviewers. With those titles on their resume, I'm pretty sure you know where this one's headed. And true to form, Idaten Deities makes no effort in hiding its fan service. Still, I think the show has some pretty good content once you get past those sketchy elements. Good content that got buried in the relatively weak summer 2021 season. Idaten Deities has been criticized as an over-the-top and edgy show that's full of style over substance. While I won't be refuting those claims, what's to say that these kinds of insane fight animations, over-the-top power scaling, and high-tension fights are actually bad? I mean, at the end of the day, it just means that the anime appeals to a certain niche, and that certain niche would definitely enjoy this storied history of the war between demons and Idaten. All in all, you can clearly see the love put into adapting these series with its incredible production values, and I'm positive the anime team know what they're doing and who this show is made for. Still, it doesn't help for its bid in popularity if there is any. It also doesn't help that it aired alongside Goboyashi-san, ironic as it may be. If you're the type who's always raring to watch a show that goes in your face with the pretty visuals, eye-popping fights, and a dash of fan service, then this one could be the show for you. However, if you're up for the more artistic side of things in the traditional sense, perhaps you can try Vampire in the Garden. The Netflix model is something that I've often criticized in my videos. I don't have empirical data for this, but I really think that one of the best things when watching anime is the weekly wait and the community discussions that come with it. Immediately dumping stuff in one go for a binge model may be appealing for some, but come on. Have you ever seen engagement for something like Stone Ocean? Vampire in the Garden, I feel, falls victim to the same model, because I do feel that the show has what it takes to be a cult classic. Vampire in the Garden's strongest suit comes in its production values. With Studio Wit and IG at the helm, not much is to be expected, and the art really shows. It comes with an engaging story that, while isn't unique, does the job well enough without being too dragging or too short. Of course, Vampire in the Garden caps at being cult classic level, never breaking the glass ceiling of being a mainstream anime. The overall vibes, the not so unique premise, and all that makes it something that feels like it's better done as a movie. That doesn't sound bad by any means, and if you want a title to relive the good old medieval fantasy era of the 2000s, then you should definitely check it out. We follow that one up now with Super Crooks. Of course, we lead a Netflix title into another one, don't we? Super Crooks, released in late 2021, looks to provide the anime medium a representative for the edgy superhero-like titles that the West always had in its pocket. The superhero genre isn't new to anime by any means. There's really something unique in the overall feel that Super Crooks gives. Then again, it's a series by the guy from Marvel who brought us things like Kick-Ass. So everything makes much more sense now. Super Crooks takes us to a vibrant world of superheroes and supervillains. Hardly a unique premise, I know, but I found myself growing endeared to the characters as the show went on. They're charismatic in their own ways, and their dynamic together is a joy to watch. They really fit so well in this world that the creator came up with, and the same goes for their role in this story that quickly rushes into full throttle. I really enjoyed this show. It's not groundbreaking in terms of anti-hero / superhero shows or heist shows, but it does bring a different flavor to it, if you will. Something unique, Western, yet works so well in anime form. Causing waves all over the world is the popular mobile app Darwin's Game. It's said that once you install the app, you get a special power called a sigil in addition to benefits like effortless shopping and many more. Sounds cool, right? Well, there's a catch. As our protagonist Kaname finds out, the app is actually a trap that pits sigil wielders against each other in death games that can start at the spur of the moment. Now, that's what you call living life on the edge. Thankfully, Kaname got blessed with probably the most versatile ability one can have, matter reproduction. But will it allow him to survive Darwin's Game and uncover the truth behind its creation? True to its name, it's an anime that gives us the initial premise of survival of the fittest. However, it actually shifts gears and starts focusing more on how our protagonist forms his band of reliable allies and their fire-forged bonds. The show's action-packed, and I really did enjoy seeing the party form and how they overcame the challenges in their way. Darwin's Game is probably not the most unique or memorable show out there, but it is loads of fun and excitement. Losing a loved one is never easy. When Aika, Yoshino's girlfriend, dies, her brother and Yoshino's best friend Mahiro disappears. The latter would disappear and only re-emerge to save Yoshino from a strange girl who has him at gunpoint. A supernatural action series from late 2012, Blast of Tempest was probably one of my favorite Bones shows from that era. It keeps you seated and wanting more with its plot, and I really enjoyed the story due to having quite the passing interest in classic literature. Yes, Blast of Tempest is that it draws a lot from literary works, specifically The Tempest and Hamlet. Those plays tie in nicely with the show's themes that focus on escaping the chains of the past. Up next is a more apocalyptic take on the genre, Wolf's Rain. Wolf's Wolf's Reign takes us to a world on the edge of ruin. Thanks to humanity's greed and pride, the once glorious home planet has been reduced to a handful of cities scattered across a barren wilderness. However, hope remains in the forms of an ancient prophecy that tells of wolves finding their way to the mystical realm known as Paradise. The problem is that no one has seen a wolf for ages. The truth is that wolves have learned to disguise themselves in the form of men, existing within society to protect themselves. Wolf's Reign tells us the story of one such wolf, Kiba, and his companions who set off on a journey to the Promised Land. However, danger lurks at every corner, as it's not just they who want to reach paradise. Coming from Cowboy Bebop screenwriter, Wolf's Reign is a gorgeous-looking adventure series that should really be talked about more. I guess the problem lies in the actual production itself here. That's because Wolf's Reign had a pretty troubled production thanks to an ongoing disease outbreak almost 2 decades ago. Guess history repeats itself, doesn't it, unfortunately? That's why you should take the time to watch the OVAs that conclude the story if this series interests you. Here's a Chinese anime for a change, and it's one of the most popular ones out there. Dao Zu Shi is one of the excellent Chinese novel adaptations that combine action and Asian mysticism. 13 years before the start of the story, Wei strayed down the path of evil and unleashed destruction. His reign of terror would be put to a stop, but he reincarnates in the present day and reunites with his former classmate Lang Wangji. The two then move to uncover the truth through a dark energy and a supernatural mystery that begins plaguing the numerous clans. Thanks to its intriguing plot and excellent art, the series received much critical acclaim. However, still so little talk about it. It certainly felt so underrated given the reception when it was first being released. If you happen to enjoy Dao Zu Shi, you can enjoy the story in its numerous other adaptations, such as the webcomic or the drama. Up next is Eden of the East, Careless Monday, a missile strike on Japan with miraculously no casualties. Everyone moved over it, and it seemed like a distant, irrelevant event for people, including Saki Morimi. What wasn't irrelevant, however, is her encounter with a naked amnesiac with a gun and a cell phone in the United States. Things will just get worse for Saki. She quickly finds herself embroiled in a death game involving money and the fate of the world. What will become of the duo and the battles against fellow phone-wielding individuals they now find themselves in? How does this all connect to Careless Monday? You're gonna have to watch the show to find out. It's the second mystery action anime featuring death games and cell phones, and I think that Eden of the East, compared to Darwin's Game, leans more on the mystery side of things. With each episode, you get the urge to want more with every episode thanks to how the suspense gets built up. In its time, 2009, it's also very novel as an idea, and I think that it still holds true to a lesser extent now. In the future, crystalline life forms called gems inhabit a mysterious world where they must fight the Lunarians, a species that kidnaps them and turns them into jewelry. Foss, one of the gems, longs to join the battle, but thanks to their condition is forcibly relegated into the furthest job from such a desire, a historian. Being assigned to compile the history of the world is a mundane and pointless task for a lot of them, but the new job sends Foss into contact with Cinnabar. Seeing the mutual unhappiness in Cinnabar, Foss decides to help the fellow gem find a role for them to enjoy. What adventures await the duo? Land of the Lustrous, for me, shines in its handling of its world. It's set in a very fantastical world with very interesting residents that you can't help but want to know about. It's got some action blended into the very meaningful plot, and despite lacking initial hype, it's one of the best mystery action anime out there. Seriously, people need to appreciate this one a lot more. If you're still up for more death games, how about another one? Spring 2020 sleeper hit Gleipnir. Shuichi may seem to be your ordinary student, but he just gets the ability to turn into a fursuit monster. He doesn't know how he got the powers, nor does he want anything to do with them. However, an encounter with Claire exposes his secret and lets him know Claire's secret of her own. Claire's been long looking for her sister, who also turned into a monster. Together, the two form an unlikely duo out to search for the truth behind monsters, Claire's sister, and the Shuichi's powers. Aliens, otherworldly abominations, transforming people, simple, everything goes in this grim and deadly mystery. For a lot of you who haven't watched the anime, your exposure to Gleipnir probably came from videos talking about its amazingly animated fight scenes. However, if you go beyond the fights, I think that the plot is very intriguing, and seeing the character dynamics in play make Gleipnir a winner in my book. It may seem like an edge fest, but it's actually a lot more profound than it seems to be at first. Watch it.
いい写真が撮れた。変身した方がイケメンね。
アジンだよ。本当にいたなんて。
17 years prior, mysterious humans known as Ajin made their presence felt in Africa. Since then, they've been classified as a top-level threat, and the world has mobilized to eradicate them or take them into custody. The world has been kept free of them, to the point where aspiring doctor Kei Nagai knew little of them when he survives an accident and is reborn as one of them. Now, with a target on his back, Kei finds himself on the run as he looks to uncover the truth behind these super creatures, slowly realizing that maybe the real monsters aren't as far away from humanity as he once thought. I've made it clear in some of my previous videos that when it comes to action-packed thrillers that have an air of mystery, Ajin is one of my favorite anime of all time. The CG might take a bit of time to get used to, but don't be deterred by that. After all, you'd be missing out on one of 2016's hits that skillfully combined action, suspense, unraveling twists, and a rather profound take on humanity's nature. Who says that we're done with literature references? Blast of Tempest had some callbacks to a literary work, but how about an entire series focused on actual authors of your favorite literary masterpieces? Oh, and give them cool powers to boot. Due to incidents involving a tiger, Atsushi finds himself kicked out of his orphanage and left a vagabond in the streets of Japan. His seemingly mundane life comes to an end when he saves supernatural detective Osamu Dazai from drowning. The detective's investigation on the tiger puts Atsushi in quite the bind, and the latter finds himself forcibly pulled into the world of supernatural investigations and battles. Combining the aesthetics of the early 1900s with the modern Japan setting ended up being a good call, and I found myself thoroughly immersed in the story thanks to the cool developments and the powers. I'm not sure if I really consider Bungo Stray Dogs to be underappreciated because it does have a fan base. However, for how great it is, I thought that this would have been the next big thing. So if you're up for some urban action fantasy, I heartily recommend this show to you. Have you heard of this one before? Constantly a Type Moon fan favorite, Garden of Sinners is a series of movies chronicling a string of baffling suicides in Japan. To investigate the events, a detective agency dispatches the dynamic duo of Mikiya Kokuto and Shiki Ryogi. A contrasting duo of a normal boy and girl wielding the mystic eyes of death, they have their work cut out for them. Garden of Sinners prides itself in its unorthodox watch order and the numerous layers that can be peeled from its story. It could be a standard paranormal investigation story, but it could also be interpreted as people coming to terms with life and death. It's not an easy watch, being dark and twisted a lot of times, but in terms of considering anime as a profound piece of philosophy and art, Garden of Sinners is probably one of the best bets to support this point. An awesome 2015 show, Arslan is one of the shows that made me love the historical kingdom adventure drama genre. It does help that around that time, I was still feeling the high from both seasons of the Magi, and I also had Yona of the Dawn fresh in my mind. It probably led me to enjoy this story of betrayal, character growth, and war more than I would have otherwise. That's not to mislead you into thinking that I only liked Arslan because I was already inclined to war stories. On its own, Arslan stands out as a strong story of an epic journey of a disgraced prince's redemption. The first episode wasted little time grabbing my attention and giving me emotional stakes for the character. Each episode kept me wanting more, and the gradual yet consistent world building as more mysteries unfold is something to watch out for. The genre is not something that lends itself to being super mainstream, especially when everyone's eyes were on Unlimited Blade Works, Nisekoi and Seraph of the End at this time if I recall. Still, this is a hidden gem you should definitely try. Fall 2013 is a memorable season for me. It was a time when it was harder to count the seasonals I didn't follow, and it was a time Kill La Kill took the world by storm. Do you know what else this season had quite several of? Those supernatural fantasies that take place in a world like our own. I liked all of them that aired at this time, but caught underneath Beyond the Boundary, Strike the Blood, and Tokyo Ravens was this underrated gem. What sets this Yozakura Quartet anime apart from its three other peers is its willingness to take a less than conventional approach, and that much can be evident by comparing all four of their key visuals and posters. The more unconventional approach extends past the visuals and influences the flow of the plot and the overall feel of the characters. It's bizarre, but it's still a really quirky and fun oddball amongst the family if you get the picture. It does a serviceable job at blending in its heavier emphasis on comedy and the shonen-type battles featuring its rather whimsical set of characters. It was the furthest thing from a mainstream hit in its time, but that doesn't mean that it's not worth your time to give this one a shot. King's Avatar is an interesting example. I feel that it's not exactly as forgotten or niche as the previous two titles, but it does deserve a bit more appreciation. I've enjoyed the recent hit Shangri-La Frontier, and I thought that it would have been cool to have more shows revolving more around the games and gamers themselves, instead of the consequences or what it's like living inside one, an approach past hits like Overlord, SAO, or Log Horizon made full use of. King's Avatar had good word of mouth that sure helped its popularity half a decade ago. Esports was also in the process of booming, and it captured some hearts with its story of betrayal and redemption. It all felt like a flash in the pan, however, and that's probably due to it being a Chinese anime and benefiting from the intense mainstream marketing a typical anime gets, like those collabs, those gacha games, voice actor events, you know what I mean. Still, if you're into esports in any way and like the style of plot that has some similarities to what I've said about Arslan, then go check this one out. Talk about a nostalgic aesthetic. Clamp really made a name for themselves from the 90s to the 2000s, and one of their interesting gimmicks is how their series like Cardcaptor and Tsubasa Chronicle are connected. A lot of my friends who are fans in that era know of the main anime series of Tsubasa Chronicle, but do you know there's added content in the form of an OVA, one that adapts a manga arc that was somehow skipped? Now that, my friend, is Tokyo Revelations. This might come as a shock to newer fans, but the 2000s was a whole different animal for manga or novel adaptations. The trend didn't apply to everything, but it was an era with a lot of anime that adapted perhaps an arc or two before they went off the rails and just did their own thing with entire filler arcs or skipped content. Shaman King's 2000s versions had this for one. Tsubasa Chronicle 2 before this 2007 OVA, carrying a noticeably different tone from the main anime, was released. If there's one thing holding me back from recommending this OVA, however, it's the fact that it needs some prior knowledge before watching. You can't just skip to Tokyo Revelations. Then again, if you're interested, you're probably someone who liked the Tsubasa series back then anyway. If you've been thirsting for something more akin to a modern thriller, Canaan could be an anime to pique your interest. Set in China and giving us a plot filled with mystery, action, and conspiracies, Canaan had the makings of a cult classic back in its time. It's a straightforward tale that doesn't take too long to get going, giving us a fair dose of action film sequences in its 13-episode run, which is actually quite short for the story it wants to tell, if I'm being honest. Still, I found myself enjoying most of its 13 episodes as a popcorn flick, buoyed by the thrilling action sequences, explosions, and a great dynamic between the two main leads, who play off each other so well. It also feels like a departure from the usual fare we've come to expect from PA Works, so I found myself pleasantly surprised with the results once it was all said and done. Real Drive seems like a show that was ahead of its time. The prospect of a world being increasingly connected through technology and the harsh consequences of such a reality is something I've always found cool when presented in media. The themes felt relevant in 2024, and this anime's prediction of such an escalation by the time the year 2061 rolls around doesn't seem so far-fetched now, does it? Real Drive is a sci-fi anime that deserves a whole lot of love, but it was hard to stand out back in 2008, especially since it shared the season with freaking Code Geass of all things. There's also Soul Eater, Vampire Knight, and a whole lot of shows that can be recognised by anime fans about to turn 30 now. I have to give Real Drive its flowers though for its world-building chops. The colourful world serves as a nifty contrast to the rather serious underlying themes and the high-stakes operations presented in the show. It takes a while to rev up, but once the ball gets rolling, Real Drive turned out to be a fun watch that was a refreshing take on the whole dependence on technology theme. Short but sweet. A description that's often used, but it really does apply to this Chinese anime. This time, we have a show that seems to have taken inspiration from one's work. After all, this story of an incompetent super assassin looks to be something around Mob Psycho's ballpark. It's quite the delightful treat, being a light-hearted slice of life, yet packaged with some underrated life lessons underneath. It also has cool animation, and the unique look of pretty much everything means there's no shortage of things that can let this anime stand out. It can get repetitive, sure, but what that means is that if the first few episodes hit the mark for you, then you'll be sure that you can enjoy it the rest of the way, provided you look at the series with the appropriate lens. It's not hard to see why the show ended up being really niche, but if you're up for some comedy, pop culture references and the like, Scissor Seven is something you should definitely check out. It's not a massive time investment, and it will surely brighten up your day. Cool, magical weapons, endearing characters, a narrative that's easy to follow and digest, and some hot-blooded music to get you pumping. Now that doesn't sound like something you'd expect from the creator of Rurouni Kenshin. In a lot of ways, Buso Renkin provides a different experience, one that's more of the popcorn entertainment type. Now that doesn't mean it's not a good experience, as Buso Renkin is one hell of a fun ride, especially if you're a fan of stuff like Bleach. Or FMA in the Fate series, actually. Sure, Buso Renkin doesn't come anywhere close in terms of thematic depth to those comparison anime, but if you're in for the fights and explosions, you'll have more than a satisfying experience following this series. It doesn't truly become mind-blowingly great from a critical perspective, but it also shows consistency in terms of entertainment factor throughout its multiple arcs. Now, that doesn't seem much in the modern era with all the amazing advancements in animation, presentation, and storytelling. Still, for its time, it's low-key a great entry point for Battle Shonen, if you're gonna ask me. And while it had a bit of popularity for that era, I don't think it would hurt to have more people check this one out even in the modern days. Delinquent anime has been picking up steam these past few years, but for those who are around in the 2010s, their first mainstream experience in the genre may be through Beelzebub. The premise of an overpowered delinquent being given the task of a lifetime to oversee a demon lord baby should already set off some hints that this is going to be one crazy anime. It wastes no time throwing loud, in-your-face comedy at you, and that ends up being one of its strongest points. Beelzebub really doesn't take itself too seriously as an anime, but it also has some heartfelt moments sprinkled throughout thanks to its surprisingly great character development. Oh, and of course, there's a whole slew of epic showdowns to remember. Being an anime that has a really high episode count, however, it has its share of hit or miss fillers. Still, I'd recommend taking a dip in this now underrated comedy. Symphogear truly was something. From humble beginnings in 2012, it's endured to be one of the premier magical girl shows out there, with each season getting more and more epic than the previous. It combines a lot of action, character development, and ever-increasing stakes while dressing everything up in sci-fi makeup and heavily integrating musical performances into it. It's quite the brave combination of genres back in the 2010s, but I'd say it turned out way better than expected for this smash hit that got 5 whole seasons. It's not exactly the deepest show out there, but if you're in for some over-the-top battles with unexpectedly peak hype levels, then this one's gonna please you. If you're part of the anime fan community who's invested in voice actresses and their performances, then this one is a must-watch. Granted, I feel Symphogear is pretty popular for all it's worth. However, I think that it's a title that people in communities often overlook, hence its inclusion here. That's possibly due to the rough beginnings and a stigma on how well sci-fi power armor, idol performances, and magical girls can work together. Trust me though, starting the ride and powering through the first part is something you're not going to regret. Anime chronicling the Sengoku period are aplenty. How many variants of Nobunaga are there in anime already after all? These period pieces come in all sorts of approaches and forms to mixed results actually. I think a whole lot of them are quite underrated. However, for today, I'll be shining the spotlight on a more conventional approach in liberally integrating the warring states in anime, Sengoku Basara. Sengoku Basara keeps things simple. I mean, it may not be deep, nor is it historically accurate, but who needs all of that when it gives out epic fights and gripping moments in spades? You've got top-tier character introductions, crazy stuff like tornado-inducing weapon swings and the like. The story's easy to follow, and you don't have to be on the lookout for some big brain twists that will blow you away. But actually, what it aims to do, it does really well, as I said. Short, exciting, and with a whole cast of diverse characters who have their own quirks, Sengoku Basara can be a winner depending on what you look for in a pseudo-historical piece. Now this is definitely no high-octane action piece. Casshern Sins is a sci-fi anime that's pretty dark and deliberate in presenting its themes of life and death. Right off the bat, it's not hard to see why this anime about a distant future populated by robots seeking immortality didn't come close to mainstream popularity. That, despite it having a plot that's pretty simple and easy to follow on the surface. It tries its best to cater to both markets, but I feel that it unfortunately turned out to its detriment. Action fans may not like the focus on slower paced flow and a strong focus on character studies, but even its other market, fans of more introspective anime, may not appreciate the relative abundance of action sequences. For those who can appreciate the effort in maintaining that balance between contrasting ends of the spectrum, Casshern Sins is a certified winner. It's not an anime that I can recommend anyone to dive into, but for what it does as a post-apocalyptic sci-fi title, I do feel it deserves its fair share of flowers. Card game anime is pretty fire, but to integrate cards with power, an adult cast, and the mature vibes of something similar to Bungo, Stray Dogs, or Kingsman? Count me in on that. I'm not going to pretend that it's amongst the titans of the past year, but I would also say it's gone under the radar for what a thrilling anime it is. It's got interesting characters juxtaposed by unique powers, and it deserves a bit more love for what it brings to the table. The dull moments are few and far between, and I like how it doesn't take too long for things to get going and for me to get acclimated with the world being set up by the series. Whether you like card anime or not, you'll find something to like about High Card, where The Witch from Mercury has been a resounding success for the Gundam franchise, bringing it back to mainstream relevance after what seemed to be a lull during the 2010s. Far from the juggernaut it once was though, Gundam had quite the mixed reception around that era, with what I felt was a middling reception to G-Reco and Age. That perception led to one of the more underrated entries becoming what it is in Iron-Blooded Orphans. With Mari Okada spearheading the project, people knew that they were going to get a gritty, more realistic take on the Gundam franchise, filled with her signature melodrama. Whether it's the most realistic Gundam out there is up for debate, but Iron-Blooded Orphans does provide a unique and different take from the more shonen-y approaches a lot of the previous entries took. It goes against the grain for the traditional Gundam fare in some aspects, leading to a mixed reception, but I gotta give some props for the effort, you know. The final product, at least in my opinion, is well worth the daring approach, and it remains one of my favourite Gundam series from the past decade or so. 2023 came and went, and I barely saw any traction on Helk. Anecdotal, I know, but I still think it's a shame because just as it ended, I found myself thinking that this is one of the hidden gems of the year 2023. It underwent a hell of a character development arc of its own, going from a light-hearted comedy to a frankly amazing anime when it got the chance to show off its writing chops. I found myself thoroughly invested in the characters and the emotional story that unfolds around them. It's something that I can't fault people for brushing off as a casual comedy at the start. How many animes have tried that but failed or otherwise sputtered to mediocre results? The same can't be said of Helk, and sticking with it did bear fruit for me in a big way. Don't let first impressions fool you into underestimating Helk as a series. That's all I've got to say. Now, where's my season 2? If this isn't your first time on this channel, and you've watched a couple of my videos in the past few months, then you'd undoubtedly run into one of the many videos where I talk up Pluto. My trust in it isn't unfounded, and I think it nails the mark in terms of my expectations. On the other hand, I also feel it's underrated and not popular enough for how good it is. The storytelling, the presentation, and the underlying themes are amazing. It has no shortage of thrills and emotional impact. It's not surprising that it didn't become mainstream though. There's the whole streaming batch release schedule that kills hype in my opinion, and there's an overall focus on the introspective side of things and not a whole lot of amazing fight sequences where people get excited on social media over breathtaking animation. Pretty much everything about Pluto was spectacular if you know what it set out to do and to come in with the proper expectations. If you're looking for something deeper and has a style way different from the usual battle series, teenager rom-coms or high fantasy anime fare, then Pluto is going to be my top recommendation for you.